Hello, Bond fans, and welcome once again. So I was thinking, is there any type of merchandising or media that our favourite secret agent hasn't penetrated?
Books, films, radio plays, video games. You can find Bond pretty much anywhere, but certainly one of the areas that I'm least familiar with is 007's comic book adventures. Now, Bond in comic book form is certainly not a new thing, with the first appearing in 1963, an adaptation of Dr. No, no less, but James Bond comics are certainly a rare and inconsistent beast. Marvel Comics adapted For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy in the 80s, and Eclipse Comics adapted License to Kill also in the 80s. But then, finally, Eclipse and Dark Horse Comics sought to release original James Bond stories in comic book form through the early 90s, before GoldenEye came out and Topps Comics started publishing an adaptation of that film that went uncompleted.
Which brings us to VARGR, or VARGR, I don't know, not enough vowels for my liking.
So yes, fast forward almost 20 years later to 2014, and Dynamite Entertainment announced that they plan to publish monthly James Bond comics, original stories no less, written by Warren Ellis and illustrated by Jason Masters. I've said countless times before that I love it when other aspects of James Bond multimedia look to create original scenarios and stories to place our hero in, so I was rather thrilled by this news. Not that I've ever been a comic book fan, necessarily, but I welcome any new 007 story that can keep us going with a regular fix until the next film in the series is released. With that in mind, I really enjoyed this first issue of VARGR. In terms of tone, I guess it's less like the movie series and more like the Fleming books, though as I've only read a handful of the latter, I'm kind of assuming on that last point.
Oh, come on, no, don't be like that. Come on, I mean, I've got them all. I will read them eventually. One day.
The tone is immediately set in the first few pages, which feature Bond chasing Charles Manson? or at least a Charles Manson fanboy, by the looks of it, through a construction site in Helsinki. Roger Moore's Bond, this is not, as 007 brutally kills the guy responsible for murdering 008, and we end the sequence with a really cool image. As if that didn't convince you enough that this was not your campy 70s Bond, our next sequence transports us to a crack den in South London, where people are breaking out in weird skin deformities, presumably because of some drug they're all taking. Not gonna lie, I was rather surprised at how dark, dank, and, if I'm honest, unsettling these couple of pages were. We've seen drugs in Bond before, but not in such a, I want to say, Breaking Bad sort of way. These two opening scenes set the tone for the reader perfectly and provide enough action and intrigue to keep us going through the next few scenes, which are largely dialogue-based in the MI6 Headquarters at Vauxhall Cross.
I like that the artists don't necessarily feel tied down to one particular incarnation of Bond, or indeed incarnation of the MI6 team.
While I suppose you could draw aesthetic similarities between a couple of the regulars, for the most part they're completely original creations. I absolutely love how gruff this Q is. He describes Bond's P99 as a prostitute's shooting instrument as he confiscates the weapon under the new rule that no MI6 agent can carry arms inside the United Kingdom, which does not seem like such a good idea, judging that the last couple of Daniel Craig Bond movies ended with shootouts in the United Kingdom, but whatever. Moneypenny draws parallels with Naomi Harris's more active version of the character, while a terribly stern M instructs Bond to take on the deceased 008's caseload, which includes investigating a drugs importer. M sends Bond off to Berlin to meet contact Felix Leiters, but not before 007 heads to the MI6 canteen for lunch, and a bit of chat with Bill Tainer. I find this kind of hilarious and amazing. I mean, this is just not the kind of environment we would ever see the cinematic Bond in. I mean, fold-out chairs, grumpy-looking co-workers. Ooh, is that a delicatessen?
In stainless steel!
This is totally not where we'd see even the gruffest of Bond actors. There's no style or glamour to be seen here at all, which is actually kinda cool. I can't say I'd want a film version of Bond to go to such a down-to-earth and relatively dull setting, but for what the comic is wanting to achieve, I kinda love it. I also love the banter with Bill Tainer. There's one bit of dialogue that I find fascinating and has kind of made me rethink Moneypenny in quite a way. Bond is complaining that he got his gun taken off him, but Moneypenny gets to keep hers, and Tainer replies with, "She's M's last line of defense in the event of a breach." I kind of love the idea that if there is some kind of siege or hostage situation, she could whip out a gun, barricade herself in, and fight it out to the death. Who knows what else Moneypenny has in those filing cabinets? The comic ends with a mysterious, muscular, and seemingly black lipstick-wearing man waking up and being told that he must murder James Bond. The last words of the comic are quite chilling, and I must say leave me in a great anticipation for the next installment.
So that's issue 1 of James Bond VARGR. Highly recommended. It's great to be getting a fix of, an original contemporary James Bond story from somewhere in this gap in between films, and I look forward to the rest of the story. That's it for this time, Bond fans, so long for now.